very few people with experiences like this. And of those people, even fewer could say that they recently left their job. So there are probably a lot out there who already know who I am or can figure it out pretty easily. That being said, I still believe that everybody deserves to know. First, I'm going to answer some of the questions that I received. Yes, I've experienced a lot of terrifying things in the ocean, but when you consider the amount of dives that I've made, these experiences have truly been the minority, few and far between. Basic information about our dive gear. While it does vary based on the particular job, we do have a standard that we typically use. We're hard hat divers, meaning that we wear helmets, not scuba. It's surface supplied air. We have an air system on the surface that runs through the umbilical down to the divers. The umbilical attaches to the helmet to supply the air, and movement in with the umbilical are essentials. Without getting too technical, there's a line to supply air, electricity for a light, communications, and what amounts to a depth gauge. Additionally, we wear a tank on our back as an emergency gas supply. It doesn't contain much though, just enough to get to the surface in an emergency. We don't use rebreathers for the work that we do. We do, however, occasionally use a full face mask instead of the helmet, or scuba if it's more practical, but that's rare. And the keepers of my team. I've never found any information about them online. The only people that I've heard discuss them were members of my team, and I've been told other teams have had run-ins with them, but even the guys on my team are hesitant to speak about them. I can answer more questions as they arise, but I'll get back to what while working on it, we're utilizing an ROV that's a small remote control submarine to do inspections. We've been hired to inspect for structural damage or deficiencies after the completing of operations. During operations, ROVs are intended from the hulls, power, the strength member, and transfers video and sonar images back topside. As the ROV descended into the darkness below, we began to notice that there were thin scratches along the structure. At first it was barely enough to rip the marine lines off the metal, but as we got deeper, the scratches turned to gallows, and then as we descended even deeper, we began to notice that the scratches appeared deliberate. We pulled the ROV up close to inspect, and there before us were images. They were hieroglyphics carved into the metal, and they were French. The deeper we got, the older the carvings appeared. They were corroded, partially covered in growth. Whatever was making these carvings was working its way up from the bottom. Then the ROV stopped responding. It began shaking back and forth. We lost power, tried to pull it up by its tendon line, but it seemed stuck. And we felt it tugging against the line, but it was coming from the ROV side. Something was down there pulling it deep. Two more guys jumped onto the line and struggled to pull it back up, but the line began creaking and eventually parted. We pulled up the remainder of the line, but that was gone forever. The supervisor was then left with the task of figuring out how to report our findings to the oil. One other incident took place about a week ago. During a salvage job, we were in the process of installing the rigging gear. While facing the ship with my back to the open ocean, I hadn't noticed anything approaching. But then suddenly, something smashed into the tank on my back hard. I was slammed into the ship, flattened against against it by the force. I turned around, but there was nothing there. I would later learn that I had several bruised ribs from the impact. After reporting to the other diver and to topside, we were told that they were going to pull us back up. We got back up on the stage and started being lifted toward the surface, and we kept our eyes peeled, scanning into the not-too-distant shadows. During the decompression stage, we began to see a shadowy figure circling around us. We continued to monitor it as it circled closer and closer, and began to see it more clearly. There was massive sharks over us. Now, I've never been afraid of them, but there's something about being circled by just a massive shark in the middle of the ocean dangling from a chain. That can instill a new phobia in the bravest men. Keep in mind, we aren't in an enclosed cage, just a platform to stand on. It felt like being served up on a platter. It eventually circled close enough that we could see its features, but I didn't recognize the species. It was bigger than a great white, and it had entirely different coloration. It was mostly black with a few gray features. It continued eyeing us as we sat there, helpless, praying to be left alone. By the time we completed our decompression requirements, it was close enough to touch. The stage lifted us out of the water. I believe that the shark hadn't decided to find out how it taste. On the surface, we deduced that the shark had lunged at my back, but it had only hit the emergency gas. We did another dive, this time in crystal clear waters. And there's something nice about getting a job in waters where you can actually see your surroundings. The visibility here was so unpredictable. We got to the bottom and began work. There were 2 missiles that had been ejected from a military aircraft and had been detonated. We briefed on their location and told that they weren't armed and wouldn't detonate provided they were handled appropriately. We located them much easier than we expected and began preparing to bring them up. Just as I laid my hands on the first missile, though, my dive buddy said, "Oh shit," and my stomach dropped. I don't care how many times we've worked with ordnance, I sincerely believe you will always have that uncomfortable sensation in your gut and nervousness in the back of your mind. I looked up and realized he wasn't talking about the missile. He saw a wall of sand in the distance. Something, hopefully just the current, was kicking up the sand from the bottom of the ocean. This wall of sand was growing and was about 30 feet tall. Even worse, it was coming toward us. Soon it was upon us. Now, it's hard to describe what bad visibility does in water. It's not a matter of having enough light. It's a matter of too much crap in the water blocking the light. Imagine fog, but imagine if you can that this fog is thicker than anything you've ever witnessed. I'm talking fog so thick that you could have a flashlight pointed at your eyes from an inch away, but you were completely blind to it. That's what bad visibility is in water. The moment the sand hit us, we were engulfed in pure darkness. I put my hand against my faceplate and couldn't even see it. After a few moments, we began hearing a metallic scraping sound. And then, as swiftly as it arrived, it was gone. No more sand. We had crystal clear water again, except that there was no sign of the missiles. I'd been within arm's reach when that wall of sand hit me. But now, feeling around under the sands reveals no trace of what we were working on. The next incident occurred during a humanitarian job that we were volunteering to. After 150-foot deep ocean waters, we volunteered to recover the vehicles and, hopefully, the bodies. By the time we arrived on scene, the collapse had taken place just over a week before. We spent the first day surveying the area and developing a plan to live the most we could in the time frame that we had available. By the start of day 2, we were actively pulling vehicles off the bottom. It was a difficult job, to say the least, but not because of the effort required. The state of disarray in those cars was heartbreaking. These weren't military pilots or sailors lost at sea. These were families on vacation or people just commuting to work. It was hard to say which was harder. The cars where we found an entire family with parents' seats unbuckled and them in the back seat having been trying to unbuckle their children. Or the cars where the parents had gotten out, leaving the children buckled in the back seats. I tried not to imagine the panic that had been going on inside the cars as they flooded from broken windshields and windows as the people tried frantically to escape, but I couldn't forgive those that had left their families. Each day we moved on to a new section of cars, and by the 4th day we had started noticing several of the cars had their doors open and no one inside. We were happy to find easier work, especially under the assumption that the tragedy had been lessened by people escaping the accident. That is, until I began rigging a minivan for the family inside. They hadn't been so lucky. As I ran slings through the van and prepared it to be lifted, I noticed the other driver inspecting the rigging gear. He'd been undoing one of my shackles. I asked what he was doing, and the response was not what I had hoped for. I'm checking this structural bodies. And I felt that familiar sick in my gut sensation. Slowly, I crept over to the diver and turned his body toward me. He resisted, but slowly turned its face toward me. The faceplate was fogged up, and I fought my better judgment. I leaned in close, and I wish to this day I hadn't. Inside it was dark, but I could all too clearly make out the features crawling the flesh. The person wearing this helmet had long since passed away. I lost my confidence, starting to scream. My comms were blazing, divers and topside frantically trying to get my attention. But I was focused on one thing. I was scrambling backward, trying to get away from it. But at some point I had fouled my umbilical around the rigging gear in my state of panic. The thing had again returned to its focus on the minivan, and as I frantically cleared myself from the slings, I noticed the telltale lack of bubbles coming from the hood. It was opening the minivan door and reaching inside. As I swam away from the van, I watched it grab one of the passengers and drag them away into the darkness. This was when I began to realize I might not be cut out for working beneath the seas. I continued diving for longer than I knew I should. The entire time, the thought